Hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
Really good. How are you?
Good.
Good. Welcome to Bay Mersac Agri Sales.
Chad Thiessen, you are?
Dean Appel's my name,
Nice
Chad.
to meet
Pleased
you.
to meet you.
2011 shaped up to be a pretty decent year. My bins got filled, prices are good, and it's been no cold than 5 below with every load of grain I've hauled.
It's always a nice thing when you're hauling grain. You never really like that 40 below grain weather when you're hauling grain.
You got that right.
The only thing typical about the weather this year is that during Manitoba Ag Days here in Brandon, it was the coldest week of the year.
Ain't that the truth? See what 2012 brings. I'm looking to add about 1,500 acres to my operation this year. So I'm looking for some grain storage. Mainly looking at to increase canola acres, so new storage would mostly be for canola crop.
Okay. What type of storage were you looking at? Flat
Right now I have
bottom?
a mixture of everything actually. Smooth wall bins, some corrugated bins on cones, and some larger flat bottom bins.
Okay. Well, let's start talking here about the smooth walled welded bin like this guy here.
Are these mainly for fertilizer?
Not always. Most manufacturers offer a dual purpose bin, which would be what you would call a fertilizer bin. Now that model will have a powder coated finish on the outside as well as on the inside.
Okay. What's this powder coat you speak of? I want more than just a bunch of pixie dust sprinkled on my bin.
Well, powder coat finish is hands down knee slapping the best way to protect the steel in your bin. The powder is sprayed on, it's got a negative charge to it. That way it's able to get into all the nooks and crannies of the structure itself. The entire bin then is put into a great big oven where it's heated up to 350 degrees for a specified length of time. That'll depend on the size of the bin itself. That powder then is baked on and it gives you a very hard, smooth, durable finish. Now, that's on the inside for a fertilizer model or a dual purpose bin. A grain model doesn't have that on the inside. It's just the bare steel on the inside for a grain model.
Okay, so do a lot of guys use them for both fertilizer and grain storage?
Oh yes, quite often guys will use it just for that very reason. In the fall, when they're during harvest, they fill it with grain. When that grain's shipped out and sold, then that bin's freed up and able to store fertilizer, where you can save some money by buying your fertilizer in the fall or early winter, and then you have the peace of mind for having that fertilizer ready for use when your seeder starts rolling in the spring.
So if I'm going to use it for both fertilizer and grain storage, I wouldn't have any aeration options, would I?
Oh no, you still do. The manufacturer that I deal with uses this option here, a horizontal tube. When you're storing grain, through your transition, you've got a cradle on the inside, you slide this tube. You're then able to use it for aerating your grain while you're storing grain. After that, when you're going to put fertilizer in there, then you take this tube out and then you can fill that bin with fertilizer.
So what size do these tubes come in?
This particular one's 18-inch diameter, comes in an 8-foot long section. It's good for a bin up to 5,000 bushels. You can also get a 24-foot diameter and 8 or 10-foot sections, and then that's good for a bin up to 6,500 bushels.
Okay. I see you have a vertical aeration unit here as well. So if I'd get with one of these units, that I couldn't use in a fertilizer bin, correct?
No, that's right. Because of the increased density of fertilizer, it's going to be much more of a strain on this structure, as well as the corrosiveness of it too. Doesn't react good with the galvanized metal.
Okay. I have a couple old fertilizer bins yet too. I mainly use them for grain storage now. Do I have any options for adding aeration to them after the fact?
Yeah, you can use this particular model that's a bolt-in vertical aeration style. Each piece bolts together through the manway underneath at the bottom of your bin. You can put in each section individually, get it inside, then you bolt it together inside your bin, and that's a great way of introducing air into your bin then too.
Okay. So the smooth wall, I heard there's a liquid hopper bin on the market as well, is that correct?
Oh yeah, for producers that are using liquid fertilizer, this is another option as well. At the bottom, instead of having your slide gate underneath there, it's a stainless steel plate with some valves and fittings for which you can hook your hoses onto.
Okay.
Now a liquid fertilizer bin, again, is even heavier than a regular fertilizer bin. The legs are thicker, cone sheets are thicker, as well as there's a heavier coat of powder finish on the inside, as well as the welds are all double welded. What that means is they're welded on the outside as well as in the inside. This helps to prevent any pinholes happening with, if you're storing liquid fertilizer, you do not want that. The entire bin then is then pressure tested. It's basically hooked up to an air hose where they introduce air inside up to a certain pressure. Then that way all the welds are inspected, and that way you'll be able to see if there is any pinholes in there.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
So if with that bottom plate that you talked about, because you have that plate, no slide gate, I guess you can't put any dry product
Oh
in the
no,
bins?
you still can. That particular model would have a flanged ring at the bottom. You unbolt that plate for when you're using it for liquid fertilizer, then you can bolt in a regular slide shut off. That gives you the added flexibility of using it to store regular fertilizer or grain as well.
Okay. So with the smooth wall, what sizes and capacities can you get?
Well, you can go from 12, 14, 16, 18 foot diameter on the fertilizer models. And that goes from, I just got to check my price book here. There's so many different options. Fertilizer capacities are 27 to 247 metric tons, 800 to 7,500 bushels. Grain models, you can go from 1,000 bushels all the way up to 10,700 bushels.
10,000 bushels? What diameter has that been?
That's a 22-foot model.
Okay, so what the degrees in the bottom cones, do those vary a lot?
They can vary. Typically it's from 40 to 45 degree. You can get steeper slopes for product that doesn't flow as well, but normally for most producers a 40 degree cone slope is what is required.
Okay. How about getting these delivered? What's all involved with delivery?
They come right from the factory set up and ready to go. All you have to do is have a concrete pad or a compacted gravel base for them, lay them down, and they can spin them once they get there to the right orientation that you want them to, and they're ready to go.
So galvanized bin on a cone. I have a couple old flat bottom bins that I was looking at possibly putting on some cones. Is that a good option?
It's an option. You might want to check though, quite often with some of the older flat bottom bins, they were never designed to go onto a cone. You may have to add stiffeners, or you may have to increase the wall gauges, replace some rings in it with a heavier gauge. That's because of vertical wall loading.
Yeah, okay. So why would this be? I mean, they're fine now.
Well, a flat bottom bin, when you empty it, it funnels down from the top, all your grain's coming from the top. The vertical wall loading really isn't increased. Once you put that bin on a cone, once you open that gate when it's on a cone, gravity is acting on virtually every kernel of grain inside that bin. Each one is fighting to get out the bottom. And that, as a result of all that entire grain mass starting to move, the vertical wall loading on your bin just increases exponentially.
So perhaps it's best to go with a properly designed bin and cone.
Well, once you figure in if you got to add stiffeners, if you have to put heavier gauges on your wall panels, and if you got to pay somebody to do it, quite often you're not that far off from the price of a brand new for a galvanized combo.
So with this skid, I got a perfect spot in my yard. The land's probably never been disturbed in hundreds of years. Is that a good spot to put it?
Oh, don't dare putting it there without the proper groundwork first. What you've got there is 100 years worth of dead grass. Your bin would be sitting on a great big sponge.
So what's the good way to get a good base?
Well, ideally you want to find a well-drained site. Typically that's going to be your highest site in your yard. You'd want to scrape away the topsoil till you get to the hard pan underneath. Then go get some good gravel, layer out about 5 inches, run over it with a plate tamper to compact it, lay out another 5 inches, do the same thing until you're slightly above your grade. And good rule of thumb is 1 inch of gravel for every foot of bin diameter.
So why a plate tamper? I mean, my neighbor's got a new 4-wheel drive tractor. Can't I just drive over the gravel with that?
Well, a lot of people think you can, but what's one thing that you do not want to do when you drive your tractor down the field? Well, that's soil compaction. Go rent a plate tamper for what it costs. It's relatively cheap. It's money well spent.
Diameters and capacities of corrugated bins on cones. What are the options?
Well, there again, I've got to check my price pages here. There's so darn many. Typically, the combo bins that I'm selling are in the 18 to 22 foot diameter, 5 to 10,000 bushels. Now, I do sell some models that are 12 foot in diameter, and the manufacturer that I sell, they go up to 30 foot in diameter as well. And that would be, what does it say here? 22,000 bushel capacity. Typically, though, it's that 18 to 22 foot diameter.
Okay. How about wall height? What's the most common size of wall height?
5 rings in height is the most common. A couple reasons for that. One, as your bin gets taller, it's tougher to push air through when you're aerating. Also, as that bin gets taller, then the bottom ring has to get so heavy. It's that once you get past that 5th ring, you'll find your per bushel cost actually starting to increase.
And that'd be because that vertical wall loading you were talking about?
Exactly, yeah.
My boy, he's been taking welding in school. How hard is it to weld a cone? Couldn't him and I weld one together? Then we can get to the bigger diameters? Don't have to worry about freight costs then.
Yeah, you wouldn't have that cost. However, consider this. 10,000 bushel bin on a cone. You're going to have 600,000 pounds. Typically, that's going to have 14 legs on it. Do the math, divide it out, you're going to have almost 45,000 pounds of weight on each leg. Take that great big 4-wheel drive tractor your neighbor has and take 14 of them and perch them up on a stick. You're looking at the same kind of weights there.
Yeah, my boy's a good welder, but not that good. When they're on the skids, my insurance company has told me that I need to anchor them. Is it the same if I leave 100 bushels of grain in each bin to keep them secure, or how else do guys anchor them?
Well, that's one way of anchoring them, but you want to get that product out of there and get your check from that product. So you can get good quality screw-in type of anchors. The type that I sell, I provide a hydraulic driver where you hook it up to your tractor and it spins it in. You're going to want to spin it in beside each leg.
Okay.
Once it gets down into close to the ground, it's got a loop on the top. Take a chain or a cable it around your leg through that loop, and you're good to go.
So how many would I need per bin?
Typically, I suggest that you put an anchor on 50% of your legs. Now, you might want to check with your with your insurance company, actually, because different insurance companies have different requirements as far as anchoring a bin down.
Yeah. So I guess a big drawback with the bins on cones is basically your size limitations. You can't get real big bins.
With a bin on a cone?
Yeah.
True. But you have a lot of advantages with bins on cones. Sure, your per bushel cost is going to be higher initially, but they give you a lot of features that a big flat bottom won't give you. Product segregation. If you're growing different varieties of grains and canola, you're going to want to keep that product segregated. So by having more smaller bins, that's easier to do. Also reduce risk. A 4,000 bushel bin of spoiled grain is a heck of a lot easier to swallow than a 40,000 bushel bin full of spoiled grain. Convenience. Because you can have bins, if you're taking on more land, you can have bins further away. You can set some bins over there. If you ever give that land up or aren't farming it anymore, you can take your bins back and haul them back to your yard then. And then flexibility too. By having a variety of bins that are smaller in size, you're a lot more flexible as far as segregating different grades and varieties.
Right. Yeah. Well, hopper bins sound like a pretty good option and a convenient option. So I guess why would anyone go with a large flat bottom bin, just because you can get to the large capacities?
That's primarily the main reason. Yeah, it's, you know, you set an auger up to a bin for a day or two is always a good thing. It's a lot less stress having to move augers around when the combines are all full out in the field. They're easy to unload nowadays too with the in-floor augers. You have a sweep that goes around, it takes the grain to a center point in the bin. Once that sweep makes its full rotation, really all you got to do is go in there with a broom to clean it out.
What about aeration in the flat bottom bins I have now? I use just the above ground floor ducting. It seems to be pretty effective.
Yeah, you know, that stuff, it's effective in smaller bins, you know, say up to a 19-foot diameter, it's going to work fine. Nowadays, once you get into your bigger bins, you're going to want to use a full floor aeration where the entire floor of the bin is perforated, and it has basically a chamber underneath where the fan blows the air in and then it works its way through the grain.
Okay. So with these larger flat bottom bins, I see some with the stiffeners along the side. What are those for?
Well, you know how we were talking about the vertical wall loading?
Yeah.
That's a way of taking that vertical wall loading. It's no difference really than studs in the wall of a house. Once you get to a certain height of bin, like we said, that vertical wall loading increases and the bottom panels have to get so heavier. By adding in those stiffeners, they are able to take up that vertical wall loading then.
Right. When it comes to grain storage, it's always a risk buying those bins. You hate having no crop the next year and having these bins sit empty. Nothing's worse than that. Are there any other options other than bins for storing?
Yeah, there definitely is. Yes, you know, you got to make a good point there. A 40,000 bushel bin with only 30,000 bushels of grain in it, that's 10,000 bushels worth of air that you're paying to store for.
Yeah.
A lot of guys now are starting to go with even to building storage. Our Corvette building is easily adapted for grain storage, and you can easily have the same features that you would have in a grain bin in a grain building as well. We did a job for one particular producer up by, I guess he was up by Saskatoon. He typically plants 10 to 12,000 acres of canola every year. He's got a lot of canola coming off every fall. He put up a 68 by 250 foot building, put it on a 5-foot stem wall, and in that building he's got in-floor augers where it takes the grain out to the side for unloading. He's got aeration in it where he's got drive-over grates I believe we put them in every 14 feet along the length, so that way he can have aeration in that building as well. He's got remote controlled or remote operated openers on the top to put his auger in when he's filling it. He's got OPI cables hanging on it. That thing will do everything that a grain bin will do.
Oh, I didn't realize there were so many options with buildings. Well, Dean, you've given me a lot to think about here. I think I'm going to go ahead and get some quotes from you. Maybe give me some quotes on a little everything. Some smooth wall hopper bins, some corrugated bins. Yeah, a couple large flat bottoms, maybe 20,000 bushels each, and yeah, maybe one of those buildings.
Will do. We'll get right on it, Chad.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.